Welcome back, Splunk enthusiasts. This video is brought to you by Lame Creations, log analysis made easy, where we help you master the tools and techniques to become a Splunk pro. Welcome to another video by Lame Creations, log analysis made easy. Welcome back to our Splunk learning series. Today we're exploring one of the coolest features of Splunk, how it organizes data into buckets based on time. If you've ever wondered how Splunk finds your data so quickly, you're in the right place. Imagine you're organizing your photos. You might sort them into folders by year, by month, or even day, right? Splunk does something similar, but with data. When data comes into Splunk, it's organized into buckets based on when it was created. Think of buckets like digital folders where data is stored. Here's how it works. Every piece of data gets a timestamp. Splunk then sorts this data into buckets based on time. There are three types of buckets: hot, warm, and cold. We'll explain these buckets and then we'll talk about how it sorts them. I've added an extra bucket which is frozen, and we'll talk about that after we've discussed the first three. Hot buckets are where new data goes first. It's like the inbox for fresh data. Everything here is immediately searchable because it's active data. When you think of from a storage perspective, I tend to like to think of hot as your active RAM, your RAM. So it's stored there in ready accessible memory. It's very, very quick. It's not even stored in a hard drive yet. It is literally in memory. And so it's by far the fastest. Warm buckets are where data moves once it's not new anymore, but it's still going to be frequently accessed. It's like moving photos from your camera to a more permanent, but still easily accessible place. In the Splunk world, we make a distinction between hot and warm, primarily because hot's memory, warm is going to be your fastest storage. But in reality, in the storage locations and everything else, they are slightly different, and we're going to explain them, but just kind of think about it as hot is the quickest memory source. It's going to only store as much as you can store in memory, so it won't be there long. But warm will then go to you want to partition your fastest storage on your disk space, and that'll be warm. And then you go to cold. Cold buckets are for data that's older and less likely to be searched often. It's like archiving your old photos. They're there if you need them, but not in your face every day. So let's think of it from a storage perspective. If this is RAM, this could be NVMe or an SSD, and then your cold might be spinning disks. The concept is if all of your disk is the exact same, your entire hard drive is just nothing more than 6400 RPM spinning disk, then it really makes little distinction between a warm and a cold. But if you've got different speed storages, then you want to put your faster stuff, this warm, there, and your cold on the slower disk, because in theory you're going to be searching this warm much more frequently than you're going to be searching the cold. That's the principle behind it. And then frozen is kind of like, I don't have space anymore to store this on my indexer. I'm going to move it off to some long-term storage space. And if I ever need it, I can bring it back, and then Splunk can unthaw it and then search it. But when stuff goes to frozen, don't think of it as readily available. You're going to have to take some process to get it. And primarily frozen is so that you take really old data and you don't want it erased, and you're going to go put it somewhere where you've got lots and lots of disk space and you can just store forever. Now, how does Splunk search these buckets? Well, what happens is you get data coming in. And in the ideal world, all of your logs come in chronological order. You'll never get, if all of your logs came in once and they come in order as they're coming down the chain, they'll just come, in the ideal world, each log that comes in would be newer than the log before it. And so then Splunk would just keep storing stuff in the hot. Then when hot gets filled, it move to warm. Then when warm gets, then it moves to here. Then it moves to here. Then here and here. But in reality, Splunk will look at your logs and say, you know what? Sometimes you get logs that are older. And so it'll change it. It'll throw the log into the bucket that applies to the timestamp. This is an oversimplification of the timestamp, but it gets the point across. We're going to say that we can store 1 hour worth of logs in hot. As soon as it reaches an hour, it's too much, takes up too much space in memory, so it moves here. And this will be anything from 1 hour to 1 day. And so a new log comes in, it looks at it and says, is it newer than an hour? Old? Then it stays here. If not, it goes into this bucket. If it's still older than 1 day, then it moves to the 2 days to 1 day, 3 days to 2 days. And it finds the bucket as it indexes the data that it fits in. Then another thing it will do is Splunk will search these buckets. When you run a search, Splunk looks at the timestamps in your query. If you're asking for data from last week, it'll check, in this case, we probably should say, if it's looking for data in the last three days, it's only going to look in this bucket, this bucket, this bucket, and this bucket. It won't look here because your data doesn't fit there. That's why one of the reasons when we tell people to search, be very concise where you want to search on the earliest and latest times. If you're only looking at day 3 days to 2 days, only look for that data. No reason to look for this data here and this data here. The more specific you can get, Splunk will only search those buckets, which will mean it doesn't have to search all of the data. A simple example, let's say you want to find all login attempts from yesterday. Splunk would look in the warm bucket. We'll go here, right here, and it would just look in this bucket for all login attempts. It makes it faster because Splunk doesn't have to search through everything. It goes straight to where the data should be. Plus, it helps in managing data lifecycle, ensuring you keep important data accessible while archiving or deleting the old stuff. So we're talking about here with frozen. Another thing to remember is that this data is going to be stored. This pattern of buckets is per index. So each index then has its own metadata fields. So you can say, I just want the data that has this host in this bucket, this source in this bucket, this source type in this bucket, etc. And so it can actually search that data even more granularly. Let's show that in actual Splunk. So I'm here on my Splunk indexer, and I'm in the bots v3 data set, so I'm in a little different location than normally your data can be located, but it's all the same principle. If we do a listing, I can see, oh look, there's my index, bots v3. If I go into bots v3, if I had more indexes in this storage location, I would see bots v3, bots v2, my Corelight index, etc. But in this location, I only have this index. I go in, and I can see this listing. And it says cold, DB, and thawed. Well, that's a little confusing. Let's jump into Splunk and see how it's doing stuff. So if I come in here, this is my bots v3 data, and we can see the home path. It's Splunk home, Etsy apps, bots v3 dataset, var lib, Splunk, bots v3 database. What we find is the hot and the warm are going to have the exact same storage. That's kind of because hot really doesn't get stored. It's in memory. And so if we look at the DB, that's going to be my warm data. If I go to cold DB, that's going to be my cold. And my thawed, that's relating to the frozen data. That'll be this thawed DB. So let's jump back in there. We can see cold, DB, and thawed. So let's just go look at the DB. We come in here, these are timestamps. And so basically it's storing these timestamps, and when these timestamps exceed the time storage for the warm, it will then be moved over here to cold DB. And then if it was, then it could move to thawed and etc. And so that's how it's going to move your stuff. And if I went into here, I could actually see my raw logs that are written inside these storages. So when Splunk searches and it knows a timestamp, it's going to look for the timestamp here, and it's going to then go search for the data inside that bucket. So these are your buckets, and it'll look at those buckets based off time. So remember, when you're searching in Splunk, you're essentially telling it which time bucket to look into. This makes your searches not only faster, but also more precise. That's it for today's lesson on Splunk buckets and searching. Thanks for tuning in to Lame Creations, Log Analysis Made Easy. If you found today's video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss out on the latest tips, tools, and tutorials to boost your log analysis skills. Want to take it a step further? Become a member to support the channel and gain exclusive early access to videos and exclusive focused training. Join us on Discord where we dive even deeper, share insights, and tackle questions together. Until next time, from Lame Creations, where we help you go from being a lame analyst to a Splunk ninja.